Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and we're having another Stroke Buddies Stroke Survivors Support Group meeting. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about putting yourself out there, both mentally and physically. And our guest is our friend, Dr. Julie Schwertfeger. And Julie's done 3 other presentations. I'll put them links to them underneath this video in case you want to see some of them. And I think to start off, Julie, Dr. Schwertfeger, um, I think you've got
Julie works.
What? Julie works? Okay.
Yes, please
I,
call me Julie.
I speak to you as Julie, in person, but I typically, like Dr. Hetzler, I call him Bruce, but I say Dr. Hetzler in the meeting. He earned the degrees. You earned all that alphabet soup after your name. So I'll probably bounce back and forth. Anyway, that said, why don't we get started? Julie's going to give us a little presentation, and feel free to chime in anytime you want. I'll try and scan for once she goes into her presentation, she can't see, so either raise your hand or your digital hand, your Zoom digital hand, and I'll try and call on you. So I think I've already tested the screen share, Julie, so whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And I think probably right now you see 2 screens. So let me see if I did this right here. All right. Do you only see my slides?
No, not yet.
Let me try this again.
I have it set to multiple, so it should work if you get back to PowerPoint.
There you go. I think I hadn't hit that one extra click.
And then you got to go in. There you go.
Got it? Excellent. Okay. So welcome to Moving Rehabilitation into Our Larger World. And I think the working title, and maybe the better title, is Putting Yourself Out There. And what I wanted to do is start by thanking Ralph and thanking Winnie for queuing to have me come my 4th time. I didn't realize this is my 4th time. I feel very honored to be asked back a 4th time. I love this group. I think it's really important and very vibrant. And like Ralph said, this is the more interaction, the better. So if we don't get through all the slides because we're having really meaningful conversation where you're sharing with each other and we're learning from each other, all the better. Like that would actually be a great success. And these slides are available. Ralph can share these with everybody at will. There's some links in here we're not going to dally around with, but they're there because if you want to explore more of these topics on your own, you can go to YouTube, and there's lots and lots of resources that we don't need to use our talk time up with. So my name is Julie Schwertfeger. I've been working with people who have had stroke for decades, and it's become something that's very important to me. And I want to start by talking about the topic of putting yourself out there. Even before you had a stroke, and let's just go back to when we were young, and assuming we had pretty vibrant, youthful lives where you feel invincible and nothing can harm you, so you think at that time. There's still those struggles that we went through, right? You can probably remember transitions in your childhood when you went from kindergarten to grade school to high school to college, wherever it was that you made that leap, changing jobs, joining a club, moving to a new location. These are things that make you kind of stop, feel that stress, feel that uncertainty, and then you have to make a decision of how you deal with that uncertainty. And if you're going to put yourself out there and try new things, but it's scary, it's uncomfortable. These are very real and normal aspects of being alive. In fact, to be alive is to struggle. And no one, I think, knows that better than people that have had effects of a stroke in their life, because that brings it to a whole nother level. So with that, I want you to think about your life, and we're kind of focused on the stroke, but if there's something stressful that happened even more recently, it doesn't matter where it came from. It's that it's affecting you in your life. And I want you to just kind of use that as the anchor for our time here today. And with that, I want us to take 5 nice breaths together. And these 5 breaths, each one is going to illustrate one of the talking points. So breath 1, it's in through your nose. Feel your lungs expand. Blow that out so you feel your lungs collapse and really squeeze all that air out before you take your next breath. And when I say a number and read it, I want you to breathe in. Then I'm going to breathe out with you. Okay, number 1, breathe in. This is the anchor. Each of us is unique and irreplaceable. And breathe out. Okay, breath 2, meaning making. What do changes from stroke mean to you in your life? Number 3, coping. What do I do to deal with struggles related to my stroke? Number 4, we're going to explore something called the hero's journey, which every story can be set to this common theme or premise. And the last big breath in, we're going to share a wonderful example of active training to push rehabilitation or put yourself out there in the wider world as you continue to recover and get stronger. Okay, breathe that out. So these are the things we're going to talk about. It was a nice excuse to breathe together, which I think is a wonderful way to relate and connect. And in fact, that's really what we're getting at in this talk is connection. So anchor 1 or the breath 1 is our subtext. Why do the things I'm doing in my day matter? What makes them important or not important? There's things that you're attracted towards or you desire and you feel that pull inside of you. And then there's things that people approach you in the wrong way and you know it's probably the right thing to do or a good thing to do, but it's just never going to get through. It's just not resonating with your being. And that's the stuff that matters. What makes me me? What is important to me? Who am I? And what are my values? If we're tuned into these, we can identify when there's things that we've self-identified we'd like to do more, but we can't get ourselves started. And sometimes that's the gap that we can close by thinking about who we are, our values, and the relationship to that thing that we're wanting to do. In this case, for today, Ralph and I are really hoping that everyone is bringing something that they want to do, something challenging, something you might be afraid to do in your larger world. That can be the library, a church, a job, or applying for a job, or volunteering, or a social group where you're interacting with other people and relating, because that's what we as human beings are designed to do, to move and to interact. But that can be scary, and it can be doubly scary after you've gone through changes from a stroke and the changes that can unfold in your life after that stroke. So what is my why? I'd like you each to take a thoughtful moment. You can jot this down, can think it in your mind. You can think of a picture that represents your why. What's the thing that makes you get out of bed? What's the thing that might keep you up at night if it's not happening? What are the things that when you hear or see them, you feel that thrum, that excitement well up in you? And then what are your goals? What are things that motivate you in your life, that keep you going when things are difficult? And if anyone wants to chime in and has a question or anything about that, please do. But that's just, again, that anchor. Each one of us, I have my own, and I'll share mine. My why is I grew up really identifying with the body's ability to heal if given the right stimulants. And so a big one of those, being a physical therapist by background, you probably won't be surprised, is movement. So therapeutic movement, or really smart ways of doing activities and moving our body, I think is incredibly healing, or it can be if used correctly. And in recovery, in long-term recovery, I think that also includes participating in my in groups. And my in groups would be people I relate to, people that share my values, people that might be just because they're in my town, might be because they're avid readers and I love to read. It might be because they like to dance or sing and I like to dance or sing. But it's that relating to other humans, which again, we're designed through thousands of years to do that. And so finding where that matters and how to focus on that. Did you want to chime in? Okay. And so my goals and my challenge to myself in putting myself out there is I've actually changed from being a clinical leader in stroke and brain injury recovery to go back to school and get more alphabet soup. But the real reason I did that, because I gave up a lot of comfort, a lot of good income and title, and a lot of ability to set my own standards and put myself back in being a student role and losing all that status and a lot of pay was because the meaning of being a clinical leader, I had done everything I could do in that role and it wasn't filling my sails. I was doing, in addition to that, to help people that were trying to identify where we're broken in the healthcare world and helping people with stroke and their families through recovery, because we've gotten really good at keeping someone alive after a stroke, identifying it, doing the right intervention, and getting you home. But then once you're home, that's far away from life, right? As we all know, that person that you are. And if that person that you were has changed in some really important ways to you that are putting those brakes on and causing a lot of stress and not having you feel like you're thriving. So that's my goal, is that gives me meaning, and it all is fueled towards moving and interacting with other humans and whatever interests are important to that person and their family. So the next thing I wanted to talk about related to that is meaning and coping. So when I have a change from my stroke, or for me, when I identified over and over again over a period of years that the role I was in was I kept hitting that wall, and I had over 10,000 people with stroke that I had helped go through recovery. And all of those little micro traumas of what we couldn't fix and what the system I was working in, and even with fantastic teams and pushing the boundaries over time, I could just see that there was just this big gulf that people fell into that didn't seem like it should be insurmountable. There should be a way that we can improve that. That's me. But now relating this to your stroke, what changes from stroke? What do they mean to you? How did they affect who you look at as who you are? Did they challenge who you thought you were? And how harmful was it? And how did you adapt to that? Things that go into how you cope with things that are traumatic include the culture that you grow up in, the personality traits we all just have, and then how you're raised. These all will have affected the meaning you derive from your stroke, and that can be both adaptive or very positive to help you get resilient and move forward, or it can be maladaptive, and that's something that is always the case, and it's worth taking a minute. So coping and resilience in a very positive way are trainable. So this is one of the areas that I don't think our healthcare system does a great job with. And I think things like stroke buddies is a wonderful piece that I believe should be part of healthcare recovery as a standard offering. And the ways for people to find stroke buddies and groups like this are actually as important, if not more, after you survive that stroke, because now it's getting back to life and it's putting yourself out there, right? So again, coping skills are trainable. So if the ones that you grew up with or in your culture have some gaps or some parts that aren't so awesome for you right now, the nice news is that's okay, because there's ways to learn about and train for more adaptive coping as needed. So let's talk a little bit about coping strategies. So there's these three main buckets. One would be appraising, kind of again, that looking at the meaning, defining the loss, identifying and framing what parts of your life and your identity it affects. Another is problem focused. So really looking at information, calculating what you need to do to get back to things that matter. And the importance for today is how far is your visual field as you look at the problem focusing? Is it just managing basic care and your medical appointments and some things like getting dressed and eating and things like that, or is it pushing those boundaries to do things that I like to say put the wind back in your sails, the things that really make you smile and make you feel energized, even if they're scary and you're not sure how to get there. And then emotion focus. So being able to control emotions and having a peer group or a person that you can confide in, that you trust. And I think pets, a lot of you have pets, they can be a wonderful part of that emotion focused coping as well, right? It's just someone who unconditionally loves you. Or in the case of cats, they let you know they're judging you, but at the end they always love and accept you, right? They're right there with you. Now this circle on the right, I think, is really a nice visual, and it gives a lot more than the bullets on the left-hand side of the slide. And so if you look where there's any moment where you feel a loss of control, and that can even be if you dare to let yourself think of something you'd love to do, but you've kind of closed the door and said, well, no, since my stroke, I don't do that anymore. Or maybe you do it because of your age, right? We can be ageist even to ourselves as well, with or without a stroke, and say, well, I can't do that anymore. That's for younger people. Before you shut that door, if you really start to think about what is it about that that appeals to you, tie it back to the values of why did it give me that thrum, and set a goal of something that you feel is a step towards that, or something similar to it that might give you that same sense of joy. And then think about how you might get there. Those are coping strategies, right? It's ways that you identify a path to overcome something that is beyond what you feel you're capable of doing in the moment. And that's a cause of stress, right? So coping is a way to adapt and deal with things that cause you stress and overwhelm your current resources. So here I feel this loss of control thinking about this thing that I'd like to do that I can't. And I'd like everyone to think about something that they'd like to do that right now they feel they can't. And I'd like to invite you guys to chime in if you want. Is there something that's on your mind that, as I've been talking, you are excited about, but also feel like you can't, or it's just very scary to think about doing that? Something you did prior to stroke, or even if you didn't do prior to stroke, something that since your stroke you feel is off the list of things you can do.
I have something.
Oh, good. And say your name because I can't see you guys. I wish I could see your lovely faces.
If you want, you can
Winnie.
bounce in and out of the PowerPoint.
Oh, I'll do name.
It's Winnie, by the way.
Winnie. Okay, please share, Winnie. Thank you.
Um, Before my stroke, I was doing Hawaiian quilting, and then my stroke came on, and now I cannot do anything with my left side affected. So I was talking to my friend this morning, and he said he would help me find somebody that can help me. But like every time I think about it, I take out my quote stuff and I said, maybe I can do it today. How can I hold a needle and do it? Because Hawaiian quilting is really fun, fine needle turning up and down. So um, trying to do it till today is hard, but yet I'm trying because my stitches are getting smaller than normal. So I think before before 10 years, I'm gonna go back to my quilting. So that's my strategy.
Oh, that's excellent. And you even shared some of the strategies you used. And it sounds like you ask questions and you reach out and ask people for ideas. Those are really vibrant, adaptive coping mechanisms. And so I don't know if I know what Hawaiian quilting is, but you've now piqued my curiosity.
It's fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I have met, there was someone actually at one of Mary Lee's stroke camps who had, she liked to crochet and
Mm.
she learned how to do it again with one arm after her stroke. And it took a lot of determination, a lot of hard work, but she loved it and she found a way to get back to it, which is amazing. I love that. Does anyone else have a something they're working on getting back to, whether they've found a path like Winnie or whether they're still struggling with, can I even think about this?
I have something I can say, and
Yes.
two things actually. But sometimes you have to try and figure out how to adapt, because Winnie and a couple other people like to sew. I also sew, believe it or not. And we formed a sewing, knitting, and crochet group for one of our specialty groups for people who like to do that kind of thing. And Winnie figured out that she could tape two pieces of fabric together so that when you put them through the sewing machine, you didn't have to have both hands to hold them. And then it came up like threading the needle and changing the needle. And I figured out if you I took a pair of like vice grips, put the needle in there, threaded it. Then with one hand, I put it up. The challenge with changing the sewing machine needle is it takes two hands, one to tighten it while you hold the needle up. So if you have the thread going through it, you can take the thread and depending on the amount of function you have in your hand, you can either hold it slightly or pull the thread up and guide the needle into place, and then you hold it there and you can tighten the needle. So being open to adapting is a huge, opens the gate to a lot of, being able to do something for the first time or return to something you love. And one of our members here in the audience, Mindy, was an artist, and she has learned to paint with her left hand. So maybe Mindy would like to say something. Maybe I don't see her, but I'm pretty sure she's still here. Mindy, are you still? Yeah, she's still here.
Yeah, that had to be hard, Mindy. And have you noticed, did it change your work? And how did you deal with that? And how's it going?
I'm asking her to unmute. She's got herself muted.
Ah.
She could be getting a glass of water or something.
Oh.
Anyway,
yeah, well, we can ask her if she comes back. That would be wonderful to hear.
Yep.
So just within Ralph and Winnie's examples and the one that
if you hold your space bar, you might be able to speak.
What?
If she holds the space bar, if she's muted and holds the space bar, it will allow her to speak.
I think since we can't see her, she may have stepped away to get a glass of water or something, right? That's what we don't know.
Yeah, she had her video up, and she has to unmute herself. If she's muted, I don't think I can unmute her. I only get asked to unmute. Anyway, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. So just in those three examples, you can see the active coping. So this outer light purple ring gives all of these different ideas that you might identify with, right? So if you look in that purple circle, you can go ahead and like circle these or jot them down or note them mentally. Do you pay attention to your feelings? Do you check in with yourself? Do you share feelings with somebody who cares about you? And I think that should include pets. So it can include your pet too if you live without another person, but you have pets. Are you seeking solutions? Winnie, you gave such a great example, and so did you, Ralph, of seeking solutions. Do you forgive yourself and others for things when they don't go well? Do you stay in the moment, get enough sleep? All of these are active coping. And my favorite that I want to focus on again today is the interacting with other humans, right? So I was at a library, my new favorite library, which is like 3 towns over from me, but you can register your library card where it crosses over and you can use it. And it's just such a wonderful community feeling in that library. The last time I went in there was a knitting group, and they have these little sitting areas where it's just set up. The environment is right for people to gather in a nice way, but not be loud. And the sound acoustics are nice where you don't get overwhelmed. I don't know if any of you are sensitive to sound. I've not had a stroke, but I'm very sensitive to sound. So I really relate to that aspect of a lot of people that I've met with brain injury and stroke. This was none of that, but there was like these 5 ladies sitting together in this beautiful seating arrangement in the middle of one of the sections of the library, and they're crocheting away. And I'm like, I wanted to join that group. And it was just that human interaction, but also they had a skill that they were supporting each other and giving each other tips and having that shared experience, which again, as human beings, we're wired for that to be an important part. If we can find something that is safe and we desire, and then find a way to join that. I may be trying to learn to crochet just to join that group of ladies. It's not a skill that I've ever learned. Now, in the middle ring here, this green one, this is the more negative coping styles. I have some of these. You may have some of these as well. If you lash out, externalize, something goes wrong, and you're like, that guy did that to me, right? If you withdraw when something goes wrong, and you just kind of close down. If you need it to be 100%, or you don't count it as a win, having denial or defying things, things like that, blaming, intellectualizing, these would be the more negative ones. And then the middle one, go ahead.
I would say Mindy's back. Mindy, we were talking about adapting in terms of putting yourself out there and returning to or picking up on something you want to do. And I mentioned that you had learned to paint with your left hand since your right side affected, and wondering if you wanted to tell us a little bit about that journey that you took.
Sure, I can do that. Julie, it was 4 months after I had the stroke. I was in the rehab for 2 months, and then I got to come home. But the thing about me is I don't have the close proximity of getting therapy per se. Like, this is why I reach out to stroke buddies, because it really is my only way of connecting to strategies and so forth. But my stroke happened. I can't remember what stroke I had. I know I did have one, and I know I was told what I had, but I can never remember, so I can't even do that. But but I became an artist at 50, so it wasn't like my whole life or anything. But when I was 59, so 9 years in, I had that stroke. And then 4 months after, the stroke affected my dominant right hand side. Okay. And then I said, oh, but you have passion. You have a passion for things. People are very complicated in terms of complex. And one of the parts about me is I had a passion for art. And I felt it was so important to continue, but I was devastated that I had this stroke when I can't even move my arm anymore. I move it constantly to exercise, but it's very stubborn. It hasn't received the message yet that to work. So anyways, I began with the left hand instead. For the right, I still use as therapy, but on the right, I could still create beautiful art. And I mean beautiful art in the sense that people will pay like $2,000 for something that I have made, whether they know I'm left-handed or not. And that to me is amazing that I can do that. And I don't know, it's like the brush has a free will, a magic brush. I don't know. So yeah,
Wonderful.
just to share that. The first one though, the first piece of art that I did was all choppy and big strokes and everything. And that was a style all its own, I suppose. But now I could do a portrait of a person or people, and it's like, how do you get the skin tone, that kind of thing. So I've come a long way. It is 2 years now since the stroke has taken place. So I've been doing art for less than 2 years, with my non-dominant hand.
Wow, what a wonderful example of that you just illustrated, and adapting and overcoming so successfully. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Mindy.
My biggest
Oh, go ahead, Mindy. Sorry.
My biggest problem is that my non-dominant hand is far too efficient. I forget and I get busy and I'll use it more when I should have a brush or something in this hand to remind my brain that.
I was going to say, not only, part of putting yourself out there is adapting. We talked about that, but another part of it is persistence. You have to want something and you have to keep at it because, Mindy described her first painting as a little rough, but it didn't make her give up. But she didn't give up. And what's happened over the last couple of years, she's fine-tuned her skills. So persistence is important. John, you've got your hand up, so why don't you go ahead?
Oh, you got to unmute, John. There you go.
Thanks, Julie. Ralph said a lot of things I want to say, but why is my why? My why is be of service to other people. It's more about other people than me. Things that motivate me, meeting new people.
I totally agree.
And my goals are be more active, take a leadership role, and be more organized. I belong to a service club and I'm around people all the time. And when I had my stroke, my friend said, why don't you be like the head honcho? I said, my voice, I can't do it. She says, Mr. Brummer, you can do it. Just have confidence. That stuck with me. I have confidence in myself. And I did recently a commercial about stroke with two friends of mine who also had a stroke in the same club. Well, it's not the same chapter, but the same organization. We did it together and it's on YouTube. So I'm happy we did that. And I hope that helps other stroke survivors, caregivers, and their families and friends. And also to meet new people, I started a stroke group where I live in Lodi, California. And they did a newspaper article about the group because there wasn't one, it's a small town. But how it turned out, it was more about me and my journey with my stroke. And I didn't expect that. And I'm thankful that we got started. And last week I found out the stroke group I started, the hospital wants to take it over. And I'm okay with that because they have the resources, knowledge, and resources to do it more than I do. So I'm really, and nearby, we have a stroke group in Sacramento, one in Roseville. I go 50 miles one way to attend a stroke group meeting in person because I like people.
Well,
That's it.
you're talking about community there, and that's good. The other thing is helping people feels good. The other thing is I know a little bit about your story, and I think this is true of anybody that gets involved in things, particularly helping other people, is you've benefited from it in terms of your own recovery. So that's a big part of getting out there. While you were talking, it made me think of Ryan. Are you okay to talk about Ryan May? Are you okay to talk about? Let me ask you to unmute. Are you okay to talk about your journey to get on public transit and go to the senior center? I won't tell enough of your story. I'm going to ask you to unmute though, so we can hear you. There you go.
Yes, sir. Most definitely.
Go ahead.
Yes. With my wife's help, as well as with the insurance company, we had to go through a lot of hoops and ladders to get the mailer sent out and then deliver it by hands, properly authorized, just to get tickets, to get access to the local Palm Tram to come and pick me up. Sometimes it's the bus, sometimes it's a minivan. But it's nice because it's well equipped with a lot of safety equipment, and they're very well organized. But getting into the system was amazingly difficult at times because it required a lot of hoops and ladders and waiting for snail mail, as they say. Comes through the mail, got to receive your paperwork, fill it out appropriately, go to the right place, turn it in, so on and so forth.
And tell us where they take you and why you want to go there.
Yes, sir. That and the app they had originally is very out of date and difficult. And my wife and I just recently discovered they have a new app out there. But people who use it may not be aware of it. I know I wasn't until I kind of stumbled upon it one day. So it's like,
don't you go to the senior center to help people? Not
that was my plan, but the general consensus, the gentleman who owned it, when he found out that I was previously a teacher, said, well, I want you to teach computer classes. My original goal was just to be there and volunteer in a small way and work my way up to something larger. But immediately he said, well, if you were a teacher then, you should be a teacher now. So we'll set you up with a class of 20 for starters. And I'm like, well, maybe a little slower and then work my way up to that. But
so are you involved in that process now, building up?
Not at this time. We've kind of put a hold on it due to other issues I'm dealing with, one of which is a trip up to see family in Ohio.
Okay.
But with my wife's assistant, we're getting me out to social events.
Well, that's good. Family's always good. Last time we talked, you had just started going to the senior center. It was perhaps before they tried to overwhelm you with a class. Somebody needs to talk to that gentleman. But anyway.
Yeah, but I just want to add too, way to set your boundaries, Ryan, to know to say, we're going to put a hold on this. I have family social things, and that's a really important part of our life and putting ourselves out there as well, right? And I don't know about anyone in this group specifically, but I certainly know many people who, after their stroke, the changes that they have can lead to rifts where family members and friends don't know how to deal with stuff, and it creates an awkwardness, and sometimes things break apart. So that engaging with family and enjoying family is so important. So well done, sir. That's wonderful.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, the hard part is I also have a former manager who wants me to get right back to work because of my former teaching skills. What's the holdup? He's like, come on now, start training my new recruits fresh out of high school.
That's the old like treat it like the flu thing. People who don't understand stroke often think like it's like the flu. You ought to be over it in a couple of weeks or whatever, and they don't understand it's kind of a lifetime event.
So each one of these wonderful sharings that have just gone on here, Ryan, Winnie, John, you all also are illustrating self-advocacy, right? Knowing when to say no, knowing when to push even though it's hard, it shows that you're checking in. Remember, one of those positive active coping things was to take your emotional pulse and say, what does this feel like to me? Because so many times somebody will say something that sounds so wonderful, like, oh yeah, not only do we want you here, we want you to teach, we want you to teach a class of 20, we want you to come back to work. And that can be something that seems wonderful, but it's too much too soon, or it's just not the right thing for you. And if you don't check in with yourself, I don't know about you, I certainly have many stories of people who went back to work, a supportive, meaning to be supportive manager, and then they just failed, right? It was too much. People weren't asking the right questions and making the right supportive stepwise progression. And that's bad too, right? So it sets you up for this big high of like, oh yeah, everything's going to return to normal. But no, it's denying the realities of the things that should be looked at and appreciated as you decide that journey. What is that path that's right for you now versus just go back to the way things were, right? Come back full bore working. Maybe not, right? And these are wonderful examples where your self-advocacy and checking in with yourself of what was the right path are really coming out. So this is beautiful. And I so appreciate not being the one to talk, because this stuff is pretty dry without the human experience, which you're all sharing with each other. And some of you may not be sharing, or you might know other survivors who aren't putting themselves out there as much. So these strategies can be things you can share with friends and other people as well, that might help get them over a hurdle where they can start to be more proactive and engage more in their life, their full life.
Well, I wrote down a few things, but I'm always hesitant to monopolize the time. But if you don't want to talk, I guess I could a little bit.
I always like to hear you talk, Ralph. And if it's more example of from real life, I think that is the best stuff.
Billy, it's not an envelope. I'm using a notepad now for your benefit. Anyway, Billy kids me about writing on the back of envelopes. There are endless supply of note paper. So I don't know, well, I guess because of my nature, I was sitting in a rehab hospital on day 1 or day 2, and I thought about my cameras and actually had my ex-wife bring my camera to rehab so they could show me how to make a C and rotate so I could operate the lenses. So I don't know how I stumble on all this stuff in my recovery. So that was probably the very first thing, because it was literally on day 2 in the rehab hospital. But I found through that I did a lot of growth, personal growth, and it benefited my recovery by pushing myself. I'm a videographer. I had a couple video jobs. After the stroke, I didn't take anymore, but I had a couple and I saw them as commitments. And I went and showed up, couldn't stand for more than 15 minutes at the time I went to go video a 6-hour conference on human trafficking. And I put a chair there and I sat down 3 or 4 times. But what ended up happening, I went from standing for maybe 10 minutes at most to standing over an hour a couple of times. So that gave me the confidence to, keep trying things. I foolishly got out my bicycle about 3 months into my stroke. I was starting to walk okay. It took me about 2 minutes to get it between my legs, and I said, how am I going to ever stop? And so I put it away, and at about a year, I got it back out again, took it down to the beach, because I figured if I was going to fall, I'd rather fall on the sand than the concrete or asphalt. And so I got back on my bike. I went bike riding last week again. I hadn't done it in a couple of years. So what did I do? I'm a big believer in safety. So I practiced getting on and off in my driveway, because we were going to ride on, was at a nature preserve. And I didn't think, well, wait a minute now. Then said something about grass and gravel roads. And I went, I've been riding, the whole riding I've done since post-stroke was on, blacktop. So I had no way to practice that, but I decided it was a good idea to practice getting on, stopping and starting, because when you're riding a bicycle, you've got a certain forward momentum. Unless your balance is awful, that forward momentum helps with your balance. Let's see what else we got.
And Ralph, I think I heard you say, but I want to make sure you also went with a buddy, right? You went with somebody, right? So that if you needed help, if you needed, if something went wrong, did I hear that correctly or no?
On
You
the
said we.
beach,
You said we, so I assumed.
the first time on the beach, I was alone, and I should have had somebody, but I I just did it. And I rode about 5 miles down the beach till I came to a water obstacle, turned around and rode back. And I'll tell you what, this is a big part of the whole recovery thing, because I can't describe the feeling I had when I got on that bike and started going down the beach. I felt like a lot more like me, a lot more normal. We're not going back to the day before our stroke, but you can reconnect with some of those emotional things, some of those things that make you define who you are, as you put it, I suppose. So, but I generally am a big believer in safety. I guess the sand was my backup plan in that case. I started taking yoga because my daughter's a yoga teacher. It's good for you. And my sister-in-law started doing adaptive yoga, and Winnie and I have been doing it for about 3.5 years now. In the beginning, I couldn't hardly, my balance is okay for walking, but you get into certain positions like the warriors, and I was having trouble doing it behind the chair. And now I've pushed the chair out of my way, and I do it freestanding. I actually found the chair would hold me back with fear. I went through a period where I couldn't I couldn't bring myself to like let go of the chair and put my arms up at class one day. And I came home and I went and I did the same thing with no chair anywhere near me. I had a counter, and it did in the kitchen. So I had a safety, but so that's a real example of putting yourself out there. And then I decided, and we've brought yoga to our community and general community. Anybody who wants to go to my YouTube channel, you don't have to be a stroke survivor, but typically that's who does. And then I decided that Tai Chi would be real good. And the first time I went, the teacher said, "Do you want a chair?" And I said, "No. Now, I don't want that chair anywhere near me because it's going to hold me back. And do I do all the moves properly? No, I don't. I can't do what the teacher does. But I adapt them. She goes up on her heels and arms forward or whatever. I mean, up on her toes, raise her heels. I started just by lifting mine a little bit, and now they're coming up higher and higher as I get more comfortable. We're talking about, persistence a minute ago. Next up's going to be, I'm going to, next week, we've got a medically neurotrained Pilates instructor. So that should be interesting. I'm going to see about taking some private lessons with him and putting them on the YouTube channel. What I'm trying to do is encourage, these are good healing modalities, but there is absolutely an aspect of putting yourself out there, because, well, I got to put myself out there to make this stuff happen. I mean, I can't. I'm on my 7th Tai Chi class. I can't do it, but I'm also not afraid to do it on camera and show people that as a stroke survivor, you can't do things perfectly, but maybe through persistence, I'm going to get there. Will I ever be a Tai Chi master? Probably not, but that's okay.
Well, and what I appreciate, Ralph, in your examples is implied in that journey of trying all these things, you're checking in with yourself. You're saying, this chair is holding me back, and you self-assessed to say, I think it's time to try a little bit more of a push. You kept pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, but also you are knowing when to rein it in. So when the yoga teacher said you need a chair, or the Tai Chi teacher, you said no chair because you had already assessed that, but you also knew to not feel obligated to follow her movements. You knew what was right for you and you adapted. And intrinsic in every one of those little steps is welling up inside of you, whether you feel it for real or you just know you have to make it, that confidence and that resilience to say, this is what feels good to me. This is what's right for me, not what someone else pushes me to do or assumes I can do. And all of those things that so often happens. And it's actually a wonderful segue into the last of our 5 breath or objectives that I'd love to share, if that's okay. But if someone else has examples, I don't want to steal back from hearing those. Okay, it might take me a second again. It always takes a couple of beats here. Did I do it?
But they'll keep.
You got it? Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
Means I didn't hit. Here. Do that. And then I have to hit this again. It's kind of a, there you go. You see it now?
Yep.
So I'm going to take the most recent, which is Ralph's example, but I could take Minnie's or Winnie's or John's or Ryan's, because they all fit, and we all have whatever one we are thinking of that was something that we really pushed ourselves, or we're struggling to see how we can push ourselves, but it's something that we want to return to or want to try. And I think these all are beautiful illustrations. If I wrote this or read this in a book or watched a movie, these could be a movie, and the theme or the premise would be the hero's journey, right? And so this is one of those. There's only a few themes of any story that you read throughout time, going back, before the written word. And one concept that you can find tons of stuff if you Google this is the hero's journey. And this is a storyline, and it's our own storyline, right? We make our own story by the choices we make and the things we choose to do and the things we choose not to do. And so I wanted to go through the 5. Other people will make them 9 or 32 or whatever, but this is a nice simple one of 5. So the hero starts out in the mundane world, right? You're just living your life, doing all the stuff you're supposed to do. We kind of all file into those things that we're supposed to do. You go to school, you come home, you sleep at night, you eat your meals at whatever times, you go to work every day, you raise your kids, all of those mundane world things. And sometimes it's stuff you don't really have a desire to be, right? Some people call it adulting, right? You do those things that are necessary, but it's not like the stuff that you're like, woohoo. And then the next step in the hero's journey is the call to adventure. Someone or something tells the hero there's something else out there. So in this case, I'd like to offer a suggestion that you could look at this as your acute experience and your rehab right after your stroke. It shakes your world apart, right? If your world is a snow globe, it's the shake up. And then there's a crossing the threshold. The hero crosses into a new world, leaving the old world behind, right? Your post-stroke life is different in fundamental ways to you than your pre-stroke life. You've reevaluated things you never probably even had to think about before your stroke, all of the things that fall out of that, and then through your recovery of moving around and how you're thinking and how you're doing stuff and what you're doing. And then the path of trials, right? And this is the one that I think really resonates with me on a human level. We all have trials, but after you have your stroke and you go through your rehabilitation and you reevaluate your life and the meaning of things, then you choose what you want to get back to. And that's full of trials, right? It doesn't all just fall into place. So I do love how the hero's journey is short formed here as describing this as you go on an adventure. It might always feel as positive as an adventure, but I think that's a wonderful word to embrace, to keep that positive aspect of all of our challenges as much as we can. You meet new people, right? All of the people you're meeting, like the stroke buddies, but even your rehab teams and people you met because you were in a different place than you would have been had you not had your stroke and gone through rehab. You learn new skills, even if it's things you did before, but now you do them differently. That's a new skill. and then overcoming these challenges. So that's that adventure that a lot of great movies and stories, The Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, pick your favorite movie, especially if it's an adventure movie, Harry Potter, those are all hero's journey that you can find all of these pieces. And then the master of two worlds, having succeeded in the new world, the hero returns to the old world as a changed person. And that's getting back to that's the putting yourself out there period on the sentence. In my opinion, it's what were those really meaningful things that you've let drop off while you were focused on recovering in more basic ways, that you want to start to poke a hole in that film that's keeping you from trying to get back to those. And maybe it's the interacting with family who you don't see as often. Like Ryan's beautiful example of saying, like, no, this volunteering and doing stuff with computer training is great, but it's going to be a hold because I need to socialize and spend time with my family. That's a beautiful example of that. Maybe it's returning to bicycling and having and Ralph, you have such a beautiful adventurous spirit, right? There's all of these wonderful creative outlets that you have that you've mastered, videography and working the camera and doing the different challenging mobility and breathing and stretching things like yoga and Tai Chi, biking, biking in different arenas. These are all great examples, as are the returning to things that you have a passion for, like your painting, Mindy, and also your quilting, Winnie. Just wonderful, and making a commercial and getting out there, John. I mean, just fantastic examples. So there are some things at the bottom if you want more information about this, of where you can find. I don't know if this is still active, but they say you can actually put up your own heroes story on this website where I originally pulled this from. So I made sure to put the .com down there. And then there's this video that we're not going to play, but it has a lot of these movie clips. So it breaks each one of these 5 things up. If you're thinking about your own hero's journey and what are your trials and what are those things you're trying to master back from your old life. And again, that ties back to that putting yourself out there and continuing your rehab in that zone, or at least with a mindset of that zone being an important piece. And we've had these beautiful illustrations. So this YouTube link is here. If you did want to see it, it's got great little clips of Wizard of Oz and Star Wars and Harry Potter and probably some other ones that I'm forgetting. And it goes step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And then the last thought was another link that I have here that you're welcome to post in. And this is one of the classes that, this is actually with Parkinson's, that there's a lot of these movement classes, but there's dance class and there's other things. But I like the ones that I first heard about from a person who was a dancer who then had Parkinson's, and part of her coping was to help not only herself, but to create classes for people with Parkinson's. And it was things about putting yourself out there. It was how you stand, how you present yourself to the world versus going like, I'm broken now, right? I have Parkinson's and I'm going to take myself out. And you can do that with your body language. So she'd do stuff like opening up and walking along this little balance thing and, just getting into a more of a power uplifted pose. This is walking through people, because walking in crowds can be scary, right? So you might not go to places if you're like, oh, I don't know about my balance. So in this class, they had a safe environment for people to practice walking through. And sometimes they would just come at each other in a muddle to have to be bumped into and things like that. But it was planned. So you overcome that fear. And so you've got this as just one example. We also have the nice tie to your last presentation, which was from Dr. Mary Lee Nunley and Stroke Camp. And it sounds like some of you have gone to that. I also have a past history with Stroke Camp, and I think very highly of them. They do theater, they do interactive games, they do things that I've actually studied. So my dissertation research was Stroke Camp, because I think it is a chronic disease self-management program that should be studied and should be added to, just as I think groups like this, like Stroke Buddies, are really important and underappreciated, where I feel like if they can get studied, maybe we can improve healthcare legislation and payment, where this is a standard piece of recovery versus all of this emphasis on drugs and interventions, which some of which are necessary. I get that, but I think maybe we need a lot less of them if we focused on this aspect of care and that hero's journey and some of these more movement and social participation based important aspects of us as human beings in our recovery. So, okay, that's.
I was going to say,
Yeah, let me give you back the floor.
Okay. I was going to say, for anybody here today who wants to watch those videos and anybody watching on YouTube, I'll put them underneath this video on YouTube. And when I post the video in the groups, I'll also include the link so that you can find those things without having to type those big long URLs. And Martha did some stand-up comedy at Stroke Camp, so she's real familiar this last weekend. So she's real familiar with the whole stage thing and the interactivity.
Is Martha here? Is
yes,
she
is.
Martha, would you care to? I would love to hear that. I've gone to many stroke camps. I used to help with their Alexian camp for the first 10 years. And I don't think I ever saw someone do a stand-up comic. So I think you've expanded the repertoire. Maybe they've changed some of the things. How was that?
You're muted, Martha. There you go.
Now, okay. Well, on Saturday night, they had a talent show, and the group that I was in, we were all supposed to participate and do a talent. So the two girls that were sitting next to me, we decided that we could be a comedy group. So that's what we did. And I just told stories about my husband because he's the funniest person. And it was interesting. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You said your husband's one of the funniest people.
No, understandable, Mark. Don't feel bad at all.
Yeah. And give me a second. The whole point of my stories were always keep a smile close to the surface because you never know when you might have to break out in laughter. But it was amazing that I could stand up and in a room full of 90 people and not just collapse. And I guess it was funny because people were talking about it the day after.
And it empowered you.
Yeah.
And it probably inspired that whole room of people. That's powerful. Well done, Martha.
I wouldn't be afraid to talk to people anymore. No, I was fortunate to have had a chair next to me and I had a microphone.
I took an oral communications class, and it's statistically a fact in the record books that oral speaking is scarier than death compared to a large number of people in America.
Well, the basic premise was, the first thing I told everybody was, listen, I didn't see any one of you paying an admission to get in here for this performance. So like in life, you get what you pay for. So I warned you all, if you don't like it, it's because you didn't think for it.
It sounds like they liked it if they were talking about it the next day.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's fantastic. And that was, you also shared some of the things that you thought you'd collapse to be in front of a group of people. And then not only that, you had them all looking at you on purpose. You had a microphone, you were standing, even though a chair was nearby. That's really putting yourself out there. And it was a huge success.
Okay.
Well, your microphone was, can you say that again?
So next year I'm going to have a tip jar.
And I love it that there's going to be a next year.
Yeah.
That makes me happy that you connected. And so
Well, if
Martha.
anyone ever has a chance to go to a stroke camp, it's well worth it.
Oh yeah, I second that. It's fantastic. And so, like that little picture with the link for that class where they're doing like interlocking arms and they're switching partners, so they're chaining, so they're bumping and they're moving. Stroke Camp has a lot of activities, but also a lot of interaction. A lot of what you just exemplified so beautifully of taking a risk, doing something in a social situation where you feel that pressure, and the part of you that says, "Wait a minute, I've had a stroke and I'm more afraid than ever." And they just push you to do these things that even before your stroke you would be like, "I don't know that I would have had the courage to do it." And they get you doing this stuff because it's just that environment. So it's theatrical, it's competitive games in teams, it's doing stand-up comedy. I just love that. And I love your tip jar idea. You could do if you didn't like this show, here's the tips so that I don't keep continuing. And then have a second tip jar. If you like the show, here's for tips. And that way you get everybody in the audience.
I got one more thing that I shared with Julie this morning that just kind of happened. I guess it's my crazy brain always thinking about things and connecting things. And that is, we had somebody in the group post something about he had 2 strokes last year, and he's returned to being able to go out on his boat. And he was inviting people to come out on his boat. And I thought, well, I've been out on boats. I actually took a job going out on an oyster boat, not sure whether I could do it or not. That was interesting, to say the least. Getting in and out of boats on docks when things are all moving is a challenge. Plus they were wanting, like, magazine quality still photographs, and they wanted to pay me anyway. But so I started asking this guy. He said, come on out in a boat and see a sunset. So I thought, well, that would be interesting. And then I thought, I was doing yard work, so I'm like raking leaves and stuff, got plenty of time to think. I started thinking, hey, if I went, I could interview him about his journey back, because he's putting himself out there, being out on his boat a year later after 2 strokes. And then because we were doing this talk, Julie, I said to myself, well, that's putting yourself out there. We chatted back and forth, and he offered to do something like help me with some fundraising by a raffle. And I started saying, wait a minute, if we had planned this a couple of weeks, we could bring some other people from the Charleston area onto the boat. And now, well, I've known them for 5 years. I was supposed to go meet them during the pandemic, and we called it off for a year or so, and I never have met them. There's a family I know that has 2 stroke survivors. One was in utero, and the other at 20 years old, different kind of strokes. And they were talking about, they used to have a boat, but they had to sell it during the 2nd stroke and wanted to come out and all this. Anyway, the whole idea of maybe putting together a trip on a boat where you invite people to put themselves out there. And then, of course, being a video guy, I took it one step further and thought, well, I should do stories about people putting themselves out there, because they're inspirational. People who are new on their journey or who feel like they're stuck or something get a lot of benefit out of seeing somebody else put themselves out there. They find it inspirational and gives them hope. And so it's funny how the universe works. You and I talked about doing another presentation, which we did today. We came up with this putting yourself out there, and it might turn into a video series. Well, no, I would say it's likely to turn into a video series, because it's a great idea.
Well, I think we all know Ralph well enough to know that it's probably almost definitely going to turn into a video series, and more power to you, Ralph. I love how you take a theme and you make it even bigger than any presentation can do, as does all of this great discussion with everyone's sharing, right? That's the stuff that makes a wonderful meeting. because hearing somebody talk is never going to do that much, but sharing real stories of struggle, that's the stuff of life, right? So this is a group that's full of life, and I so appreciate all of you sharing and all of the struggles and all of the successes and all of those moments of having stress and having that doubt that you had to overcome or are still overcoming. And I hope that you're thinking of some of those other things that you might want to tackle, because listing those out, as so many of you have shared so nicely, you can start to make that plan and work that plan and live your best life, right? That's what we're all here for. And I love what John said early on. I think it was John, it might have been Ryan, that serving others, right? That service to help others and that human connection you get and the reward of it. Putting yourself out there really helps to have those moments. And that is the stuff that you feel that rush of energy and you feel that joy, and it's good for your immune system. It works against stress, and it just starts to move life in such a beautiful direction. That's what I wish for everyone here today. And that's all I have to present. So really, it's just for Ralph to lead us on, or you all to lead on what we want to talk about as we close.
Well,
Yeah. Hey,
ahead.
Ralph. I've got my
Oh,
I
Kevin,
got
hey,
my yeah, sorry. I'm a little late.
that's okay.
I got my DMV test on
Yes,
Friday.
yes, yes.
And
Uh,
I've been fighting for it since September of last year, and struggling with the DMV and working on getting a car and insurance and everything. And
Pat,
I think it's
you had to pass your driver's test then if you got the plates, right?
oh yeah. The plates would the plates happened a month and a half, 2 months ago. So I've been, hurry up and wait. So I'm at 1 o'clock on Friday. I take the written, the visual, and the behind the wheel. So we'll see.
Go, Kevin. You can do it. You know you can do it.
Well, yeah, but I'm and my instructor said the same thing to my doctor, and even though I can't feel half my body, yeah, I think I can safely pass and drive and continue down this new life.
Well,
So.
that's great. That's great. And Julie, I just want to say, I know it's not about me, but I appreciate the kind words. And one of the things that I do in terms of, I never thought about it before. Just putting yourself out there is becoming a real theme for me. But one of the reasons, after I did yoga and we brought yoga to other people because I thought it was really beneficial, and a lot of people are afraid of a lot of things. One more thing, Kevin. Julie would totally agree that believing in yourself is a really important thing, and so believe in yourself, make it happen. So after doing yoga for a while, I saw the benefits, and I also saw that the community was a little reluctant to start the first time. So one of the things that I do is try and get people over the fear. We did some classes with my sister-in-law, and then I discovered Rachel Jarmus, a stroke survivor who turned to yoga in her own recovery, became a yoga teacher. Now she's a 500-hour yoga teacher, and she's going to certify other stroke survivors and other people to teach stroke yoga. And so we advertised that. I got a giant pretzel, and I wrote taglines like, "No, you don't have to tie yourself into a pretzel to do yoga," and that kind of thing. My whole thing is I try and package up things to make them simple to understand, and then. But the whole point of that was to get people over their fear and to try it the first time. And that's totally, I mean, I had Tai Chi on my radar screen for a while, but this year I decided to seek it out. It's doing me some good and I'm enjoying it. But I would say the biggest part of the motivation was I think it'll be beneficial to the community again. And we're going to figure out how to do, the teacher and I are going to figure out how to do the transition from chair to behind the chair to no chair, which I don't see out there. I see some, I found one set of neuro Pilates, but they don't do that transition. They assume that you come in at that level. So, you know, a lot of what I do is just trying to share the experience I had early on, that by pushing myself and getting outside my comfort zone, which our friend John Loomis, who isn't here today, has a weekly meeting, that's the title of his. I found that by pushing myself, I grew personally and it helped me in my recovery. And I'm just basically trying to promote that idea with the video skills that I had and still have. So
That's beautiful. And I love what you said. And I love the title of, you said it was John's group, the getting out of your comfort zone. So I mentioned earlier that there's struggle, right? Part of the fact that we're all a hero is that we put ourselves out there, and that entails, like, intrinsic to that is that it's uncomfortable, right? To not just follow along a well-worn groove, like an automaton, right? You're having to make choices, you're having to take risks, and it's uncomfortable. And that's what's heroic. And I think so important to embrace and say, oh, this is uncomfortable. Okay, this must mean I'm doing something outside of just following that regular thing that I do all the time without thinking about it. That means you're alive. And that's the struggle. That's the beauty of life. And having a community, or having even one other person to join. So like in the yoga class, whether it's virtual or even better in person, the interactions are also things that we as human animals need. It's good for our immune system. It's good for our endocrine system. It's good for it's just good for us to thrive and to be healthier and to need less medical care in the more traditional sense. It really is a medicine. So thank you, Ralph, for helping me put together this, and thank you everyone for this chance to share and explore this important topic. I hope it's inspiring you to pick one other thing that might be on your goal list and think about it, and think about maybe steps towards putting yourself out there and walking towards that.
well, you can't underestimate the importance or the benefits of community. And with that, I guess we'll thank you so much for coming to see us again for a fourth time. And I think this was a great meeting. We talked about a lot of important topics. We got some serious sharing in, and but thank you for coming and leading it for us.
My pleasure. I'm so honored to be back for a fourth time. I feel like I should highlight that somewhere, because I didn't realize I've presented to this group 4 times. That means a lot to me. I'm delighted, and it's a great group. Loved hearing from each of you, and I love the chance to share some of these things that I hope will help. Share them at will. Steal these ideas.
Well, you know, there's an endless number of topics to talk about. We'd welcome you back for a 5th and 6th, or whatever you're willing to do. Billy's shaking and nodding his head over there. Billy's a big fan of yours, by the way.
Thank you, Billy.
So without dragging this out forever, again, to people watching, I'll put links underneath this video for those here. I'll put it when I post the video in the groups. And thank you all for coming. And thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Do all you can with what you have, in the time you have, in the place you are. Do all you can. Do all you can.